Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. Today we're going to talk about a question from a Serverless 360 partner. They're building lots of solutions for customers in Azure, and the big challenge they have is that once they've built the solution, setting up Azure Monitor to monitor all of the key metrics and key things of interest for every single resource in the solutions, such a painful activity to do. It takes a lot of time even just for one resource, and then you multiply that up by lots of resources and kind of maintaining it, and it's just a big overhead. So the question they had is, how can Serverless 360 take away some of that pain and make it easier for them to set up the monitoring effectively? Now, that's really in the sweet spot for Serverless 360. So we're going to look at this application on the right here called Business Applications. And here we've got the tree view. You can see here where it models out a structure for how you want to represent your application. So you would define your own custom structure, modeling your support view, regardless of where your resources are deployed, whether it be in the same tenant, a different tenant, etc. Regardless of things like resource groups and subscriptions. Now we're gonna jump into this setting down at the bottom here, this monitoring settings. And we've got this feature called a monitoring profile. Now, the idea here is to make it easy to set up lots of different resources. Set up monitoring for lots of different resources. So what we would do is we can go add new profile. We can give it a name. So let's just call that Kovi integration here. Now, what we've got here is basically for all of the different resource types, what would you like your default monitoring settings to be? So instead of having to configure everything on every single resource, we're going to have a lot of really common settings. So let's say, for example, we go into our APIM service here, and we can say things like the capacity. We expect the capacity to be greater than 70%. If it goes below 70%, we can raise an error, or if it goes below 80, we can raise a warning, something like that. We could have things like a function within a function app. So let's think not just metrics for things like response times, but we can also do things like we expect that the function's always enabled. We can do things like turn on failed invocations. So failed invocations would go and query the management API and see how many errors that your individual functions had, and then it can trigger the alert and if there's something going wrong. And we've got these kind of features across all of the different resource types here. So, you can go down to things like event grid domains. You can see we've got a bunch of metrics here for all of the common parameters. We've got things like logic apps where you can see you want to monitor the state, the failed runs, and the metrics. So we've got lots of different things, and you would basically configure your standard default settings for your profile. So what I would imagine is that maybe each team would have their own profile that monitors the things that they want most common. So you would then basically create your profile. So you would see that in the list here, and then when you create a new application. So if we go here, we'll create a new application. So then I would pick my this one here. So then I could choose some resources to go inside this business application. So I'll just pick this function app here, for example. Now this is where the monitoring profile comes into play. So here I would just pick the profile that I want. So let's take my Kovi reservations one. Sorry, I clicked the wrong one there. So what would happen here is when I create my business application, as soon as I add resources to this application, it's going to start monitoring it with the default settings that I've configured on the monitoring profile for Kovi reservations. So here we'd configure how we want our alerting to happen. So we can configure things like down the bottom here, we've got alert channels. So you can see maybe I want to just pick my default Teams channel here. You can create an escalation policy. So that would be a way where you can have, if somebody doesn't respond to alert in Teams, you might then have it raise a ServiceNow ticket or something. And there's a bunch of other common settings for status reports and things like that. And then at this point, I would kind of create my business app now. So that'll go and create that in the background. It'll add that to the tree view. Then we can see here's our new business app up here. We can see in the monitoring settings, I've got settings we saw before here. Here's my profile that's turned on. So that'll be now monitoring with all those default settings. But what I can do here, if we go into the resources, go into my function app, and I can choose to override in like an individual resource. So let's pretend I've got 5 functions within a function app here. I can choose to, I could say, right, well, for this function app, let's you could take it off the profile completely if you wanted, but you might want to put an additional counter. So say we've got our default settings just looking at things like response time and errors, and this one function app you might want to add an additional monitoring metric based around that CPU time quota. So that's how you can override a profile. But coming back to the original question from the partner, using those monitoring profiles will help you create default settings. So maybe you have default settings for your integration team, your web app team, your data team. They might all have their own profiles that they apply to the applications that they build, and that just gets your monitoring from 0 to 80-90% of your monitoring set up in just a few clicks, and then you can focus your effort on tuning it. We think that's a huge win over Azure Monitor, where you're going to spend 80 to 90% of your time just getting to that basic setup, and you're going to it's going to take you a long time to get to the tuning points. Hopefully today's video helps people see the value of the monitoring profiles within Serverless 360. Please feel free to reach out with the kind of questions about things that you're struggling with Azure, and we can talk about on our videos about how Serverless 360 can help you solve some of those problems. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a good week.